Alright, part 2 of the bowl preview show. And as everyone should know by now, well, it doesn't really matter what time you see this because this is after the fact, but the bowls are out. As I've already seen on the message board and have talked to some of you, you're obviously aware of the BCS standings being out and the individual polls, which for sake of not going into a rant and for riling up people any more than they already are, I'll just leave it alone. I already said pretty much my thoughts in a few words and inside the board form, whatever, and I'll just leave it at that. So actually looking at it, as expected, Oregon voted number one, ranked number one in the BCS. I think we all don't find a surprise to that. The big question was who was going to be number 2. There's Pitt, who a lot of people voted for. I believe there were 2 in the mass. You don't have it right in front of me right now. We had Missouri that won the Big 12, had 1 loss, and that loss was against Texas. And then we had Miami, the ACC champ, 2 losses. And he was able to avenge one of them in the ACC championship game against Florida State. So looking at it, as expected, like I said, Oregon finished number 1, 4.113. I'm not going to read the numbers. You guys can look at that if you haven't already. But Missouri would finish ahead of Pittsburgh at 2. So even though I'm not getting into the bowls yet, we all know number 1 and number 2 on the BCS rank play for the championship, so that would be the championship game. And then going down from there, you've got Pitt at 3, Miami and Cincinnati rounding out the top 5, and then Stanford, Texas, K-State, Florida State, and Nevada in the next group of 5. The Kansas State, Texas one was another one to look at. It was Kansas State beat Texas, but looking at the big picture, Texas finished higher in the ranking. And another one that I looked at was Nevada, because you had Nevada, you had ECU. There's a third team, that TCU. These are all teams that aren't automatic qualifiers for a BCS game, so the highest ranked one of the bunch would end up making it based off of that. And Nevada finishes at 10, and you've got ECU and others falling below. Boise at 15, Houston at 24, and then one tough one was Ohio State winning the Big Ten, because I think that made things a little bit more complicated for the pollsters and also for the bowl games, because it's an automatic bid, and that may have taken the spot away from one of those guys or another team, like say maybe Florida that finished 11. So that kind of made an impact on things. And then you've got, some other teams down there. The SEC, pretty heavy. Out of the top 24 is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I may be missing one, but I see 5 right now. So there's that. The Big East, who I don't know how to describe it, because they played, to me, it was the best one of the I don't want to say the best conference, because then I don't want to see have the numbers call me a liar, but there are a lot of good teams in the Big East, I'll say that. And you've got, even with UConn not being up there, obviously we know UConn's a quality team because he beat VT. The Connecticut had a good start to the season, played a tough out-of-conference schedule to struggle in conference, but you've got, Dave had a good season. Obviously, Doc had a good season. Cincinnati and others, West Virginia, he got a few sim games, but he had a good record. It was a very tough conference. So they were represented well. For all the knocks on the ACC, you've still got VT in there. Miami and Florida State definitely the class of the conference, with VT not far behind at all. So good for those guys. And then the Big Ten, you got Michigan in there, Nebraska, Ohio State. Obviously, they won the conference, but they're rated below both of them, even though they finished the season 2-1 against those two teams. But they had 4 losses, the most losses of any team that's in the top 24. It makes it hard to vote when you've got everyone's losing games. Not used to that. So looking at the actual top 25 for the season, we got Oregon finishing for the final poll. Oregon finishing number 1 in both. No surprise. Mizzou finishing number 2 in both. And that pretty much is what everyone was debating, is who would be number 2. Pitt at 3 in both, and Miami and Cincinnati falling in at 4 and 5. Then Pitt in close in both polls, actually 19 separated points in the coaches and 3 in the media poll. And the next group of 5, Florida State, Texas, are in both. Stanford are in both, and then a mix. Florida and Nebraska and the coaches, K-State and South Carolina and the media. So taking a look at that and going farther down. But really what we're here for are the bowl games. So getting started, the first bowl game we have is the New Mexico Bowl, and that is Oregon State against San Diego State, the Aztecs. Good season by Ronnie Hillman, who will lead their rushing attack as they play the Beavers out of the Pac-12 and San Diego State. I'm not going to get too specific on stats because you can take a look at that on the stat site. But San Diego State would finish, if I can at least pull that up, they finished 6-6 on the season, so just making a bowl game. And Oregon State finished 6-6 as well. So on paper, it looks like it'll be a pretty solid game. I know personally, as a SDSU student and going to their games and paying attention to them in the season, they've got a good rushing attack. So I already know that Rye's definitely going to ride the back of Hillman. He's been doing it so far this season, and it's worked pretty well for him. And wish him the best of luck in that game. And then up next, the second bowl game is the New Orleans Bowl. No one cares about these silly logos. And that would be Toledo against ULM. Or Toledo at ULM. If I can pull that up. Or not. I can't seem to find it. There we go. So ULM 8-4 wins Conference USA Sun Belt. Toledo goes 7-5 in Conference USA, I believe. I may be wrong on that. It might be the MAC. Please don't be mad at me for getting that wrong. But pretty close game. ULM averages about 6 points more. They give up about 8 points more. So, both teams are pretty solid, about the same offensively. Toledo, a little more of a rushing attack. ULM, a little more passing. Both teams turn over the ball at about the same rate, and pretty similar matchup. So, on paper, signs point to Toledo, but it should be pretty even. And then up third, we have Troy playing at Southern Miss, and I believe that is the St. Petersburg Bowl in Florida. And the runner-up in the Sun Belt at 8-4 is Troy, and Southern Miss goes 9-3. And on paper, it may be a tough matchup for Troy. Southern Miss, a little more of a talented team. They move the ball better on the ground and through the air. They don't turn the ball over as much, and they put up more points per game and have a better defensive output. But what works for Troy is they get more turnovers. So if they can score points off those turnovers, assuming they can generate them, then Troy should be able to keep it close. But it will be a tough matchup on paper. And up next, bowl number 4, we have the Vegas Bowl, and that is Washington. And of course, my binder's all the way back there, so I get for taking notes. Washington at TCU. And I know TCU is Litez, the winner of the Mountain West, going perfect 7-0, but finishing 10-2. And Washington is our military resident, George's Goons, 7-5 with the Huskies. Teams match up to be somewhat, on paper, TCU is a more talented team. They score more points. They have a better defense, and they definitely move the ball on the ground a lot better than Washington does. But Washington passes the ball better. But, of course, because they pass the ball more, they turn the ball over more. So that's something to keep an eye on in this game. And up next is the Poinsettia Bowl, and that features Boise State and facing former WAC foe Idaho, so a dome game. Those are always fun to play in. Our Chusker, one of my favorite coaches in the league, 8-4. Got a good defense going with those guys. No surprise, that's what he does. And Boise, our voting aide, helper, went 10-2, lost to TCU, so the runner-up in the Mountain West. You know Boise has a talented team, definitely. Kellen Moore, I mean, they've got a lot of weapons on offense, pretty fast, or pretty good defense. I'm not sure how fast they are, but Chusker will give him a run for his money. If he can keep the game close, then he can make it exciting at the end. But if Boise can put up some points against Chusker's defense, it could turn ugly fast. And up next is the Hawaii Bowl. The little pineapple-looking football. And what do you know? Hawaii's playing at home in that one. Houston at Hawaii. So the runner-up in Conference USA, Coach Randog, and one of his favorite players, Case Keenum, going into Hawaii. Randog, like I said, was the runner-up, and as I said earlier in the first video, he had a nice run, a 7-game win streak at the end of the season to be able to get things going, to get in the situation to play. Hawaii went 9-3. Coach RB, good season. Definitely the WAC has had some solid teams this season. Pretty much it's going to come down to, can you stop, as a Hawaii player, can you stop the offensive attack of Houston, mostly through the air, and on the other side, can you stop the offensive attack through the air of Bryant and the Warriors? So whoever passes the ball better and protects it find themselves with a win. Up next, Little Caesars Bowl, Western Kentucky and Kent State. Western Kentucky went 7-5, I believe, with definitely one of the worst passing quarterbacks on the game. That's really not even debatable. I'm trying to look up here. I know, obviously, Kent State, the champions of the MAC, and Coach Nick. There we go. No, it's on here. So Kent State 9-4 thanks to the extra game. Western Kentucky 7-5. Basically, if Kent State can force them to run the ball or get them out of the run game, they've got a good running back in Rainey. They've got a good quarterback that can run, but other than that, it can get ugly pretty fast if Kent State's able to get a lead. So Kent State does protect the ball fairly well, and it's a matchup against a Sun Belt team. So Sun Belt teams, no offense, are not usually the most talented bunch, but if they can protect the ball and build up a lead and just pin their ears back and force Jakes to pass the ball, it can get ugly. So up next, the Independent Bowl. Duke and Coach D. Kane play against John and Air Force. Duke off to a hot start but cooled off towards the end, finished 7-5, so still a good season for the Blue Devils. And Air Force 8-4. A little bit of a rough start for John. I believe he was like 1-2 and 1-3 and had a really good run to end the season. And this will be one of the more interesting games. John likes to run the ball. Well, Duke likes to run the ball too. So, though Duke definitely can pass, Air Force presents a very interesting matchup because they've got a lot of backs. They got a quarterback that can run, so it definitely will keep Duke on their toes, and it'll be one of the more intriguing matchups of the bowl season. And up next is the Independence Bowl. You've got Virginia Tech at Notre Dame. Coach VT and the Hokies, probably not how he expected the season to pan out. Was very close to winning or getting a berth in the championship game last season. Had a late loss in the ACC championship game to Homie, and WJ and Notre Dame struggling this season some. Finished at 6-6. On paper, it may seem like Virginia Tech's going to run away with this game, but WJ is a very talented coach. He has a good team. Other than the fact that they tend to give up more points, they still put together very solid numbers. But it'll be a tough matchup. VT likes to run the ball, and he has a good pass defense. And they're going to test Notre Dame's offense and see if they can get some turnovers and get out to an early lead, keeping the ball on the ground. And up next, one of the favorite NDL bowls here, the Toilet Bowl. Always humorous, but fun nonetheless. And that matchup will be Purdue at New Mexico. And if you want to read about that, you can go to the ESPN section and look at the bottom 10, and I'm sure maybe one of them will be in there. But it's always fun. Just something a little extra. If I can pull up at least the record. I mean, New Mexico definitely is going to have a tough matchup on paper. Purdue may not have the greatest record, but Purdue also has a better talented team playing in a bigger conference. So you've got Turo at 1-11. You've got New Mexico at 1-11 as well. So someone's getting win number 2. We'll see who. And then another interesting bowl matchup, Baylor and Michigan State. So RG3 traveling, and I'm sure they've played before. I would guess since Buckeye's been playing with his team a couple of seasons in Michigan State and Weasel. Weasel can pass, we know this. Griffin is a very interesting player to have. He's capable of doing a lot of different things. So Baylor's offense will be a little bit unpredictable, can run, can pass. Weasel has one of the better offenses in the NDL. So they've got the talent matchup on paper, and they're playing at home. They don't turn the ball over as much, which is not surprising. They put up a lot of points. They protect the ball. So if they can get out to an early lead, things could get bad if Griffin is not accurate. So up next is the Military Bowl, and that is Syracuse and Coach Barass against Middle Tennessee State. I know Syracuse, I've played Barass a bunch of times. He's a fun guy to play. He's got a pretty solid offensive attack. He always does, because that's what he does. And he finished the season 5-7, so one of the lucky few to benefit from not enough bowl eligible teams, but I'm sure he'll put together a good performance in this one. Then Coach Paxi, 7-5 with the Blue Raiders down in the Sun Belt, put up pretty similar numbers. I'm not sure what Middle Tennessee's out-of-conference schedule looked like, but I know Syracuse just in conference had to play a lot of tough teams. The Big East was stacked this season. though on paper, Syracuse has a better team. They've played the competition in their conference was of a higher quality. Again, no offense to the Sun Belt. Oh, it will be a tough matchup, but Paxey's a good coach, and we'll see what he can come up with offensively. It should be a good matchup between two guys that move the ball pretty well. And you got the Meineke Bowl. I apologize for this picture because it's supposed to be Iowa State, and it's too late in the night. I'm too tired to go through and re-record it just to get that on there. So it's Iowa State against Minnesota. 6-6 against 6-6. Old school against FSU Penguin. Not a bad season for him after leaving FSU. And the Big Ten, that's definitely been tough sledding in that conference. A lot of good teams out there. And Iowa State playing in the Big 12. Top-heavy conference there. So finishing 6-6, pretty good. Minnesota has a better offense and defense by the numbers. The passing game is about the same, but Iowa State turns the ball over at almost 2 times the rate. So they're going to have to protect the ball if they want to come out of this one with a win. And next, the Alamo Bowl. And that will be Oklahoma State against UCLA. Another matchup that I really think the bowl committee did a good job on. Should be a fun game to watch. T-Fan and UCLA MAC. 8-4 for the Cowboys. 10-3 for the Bruins after a loss to Oregon in the conference championship game. Both can put up points. Really, that's what they're built to do, especially Oklahoma State, as you got one of the best receivers in the game and quarterbacks, and their defense is probably not all that good. Just going to assume since they play in the Big 12 and no one plays defense out there still. At least it looks like it on TV, except for last week. It'd just be an interesting game to watch. It's one of the ones that I had marked down as one of my favorite matchups. So one recap that I look forward to seeing. And I'm looking at turnovers and I'm looking at passing yardage as being 2 of the bigger factors in the game. Next, the Armed Forces Bowl. Let me get it right. That's BYU against Tulsa. And Ice, second season with his team. Not doing too bad out there, doing a pretty good job. And Tulsa, I don't know what they have. I know they have 2 impact players that were rated in the 90s, I believe. I remember that long thread that started this year's game. So, cool stuff. Ice, always been more of an offensive guy. Not really sure what Tulsa has done as far as player-wise. Another guy definitely got a good offense. Ice went 6-6. Tulsa 9-3. Coach Tig. Tulsa gives up a little more points, but they score at a higher rate and they move the ball more effectively. So I think the numbers point to shootout, but both teams turn the ball over quite a bit. So I'm not sure if it's going to be one of those low-scoring games with a lot of yardage or a high-scoring game with a lot of turnovers. We'll see. And up next is the Pinstripe Bowl, and that'll feature Temple and Football Kelly, who went 6-6 against UConn and Dave. It's 8-4 Huskies. I don't think I need to say anything else about Dave. We already know plenty about him and his season, what he's done with that team. They got a great quarterback, good passing game. They're going to move the ball through the air. They're going to play good defense. On the other side of the ball, or other side of the coin, you've got Temple. They run the ball pretty effectively, almost twice the rate that UConn does. Problem is, when they do pass the ball, they turn the ball over. So they're going to have to maintain a good running game, and they're going to have to control the clock to help be able to pull an upset. I don't think it would be upset on paper team-wise, but I think for what we've seen Dave do, it would be. So he's going to have to run the ball pretty efficiently and get stops on third down. And Next is Rutgers at Auburn, and that bowl is the Music City Bowl. Coach Big Red 7-5 in another season with the Tigers out in the SEC West. Good year for him. Rutgers 5-7, another Big East team getting in to a bowl game. Dak did have a good season, and I think his signature win was that win at the end against UConn to help him get in the situation. Pretty similar numbers by both teams. Auburn puts up a little bit more yardage because of the run. Rutgers a little more because of the pass, but Auburn is an SEC team. They're fast. They've got a good defense, and they've got 2 good running backs. So if Auburn is able to keep the ball on the ground and control the clock, I think they've got a good shot of overpowering Rutgers and just kind of bullying their way to a win. But Rutgers will have something to say about that. And the Holiday Bowl. This features Texas Tech at USC. A good matchup of coaches, Nidler and Rain. USC not having the type of season that I'm sure Coach Rain was hoping he would have. I believe he finished 7-5, if I can find him here. And Nidler 6-6, had a good start. Definitely, I remember a lot of big key momentum plays in his highlights for the year. But USC scores more, they give up more points. They move the ball more efficiently, both in the air and on the ground. Defense has played very well, the sacks and the picks. But Texas Tech has been about forcing turnovers. That's been something that they've been doing all season long. And if Barkley is not accurate or makes bad reads, it could be a very long game for the Trojan offense. And I think this will be the last one on this, in the part 2 of the video here, the Sun Bowl. And that is going to be Arizona at NC State. I believe Steel City against our Tech mastermind, homie. NC State, good season for him. He finished 9-3 out there, second in his division. And Arizona, while he finished 7-5, he did have the only win against Oregon and also was able to knock off UCLA. So the only Pac-12 team that could say that he beat both of the division winners. Arizona's got a pretty good team. Stats are kind of skewed, and I know NC State has some sims, but Arizona State moves the ball pretty effectively in the air. Their running game hasn't exactly been the greatest, but we'll see how that plays out.